First hitting the country top 20 in 1979 with Crazy Blue Eyes, Lacy J. Dalton was one of the most successful female vocalists of the format during the 80s with the CMA-nominated anthem 16th Avenue, as well as hits like Takin' It Easy, Everybody Makes Mistakes, and Black Coffee, just to name a few. Well, during her career, she has collaborated with such Country Music Hall of Fame members Bobby Bare, Glen Campbell, Willie Nelson, and George Jones. She's also toured with the Outlaws like Hank Williams Jr. at a time when it was very unusual for a woman to do so. But she also toured for a very long time with Willie Nelson and was the only female on his Half Nelson album. And Lacy J. Dalton is a 2017 inductee of the North American Country Music Association International Hall of Fame. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the country music living legend herself, Lacy J. Dalton. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. I am pleased to be here.
Well, I want to just kind of go back in time here because you have such an interesting history. What was the spark that ignited your desire to pursue music?
Well, I actually was the unmusical one in my musical family. Don't you dare say anything. Don't even think that. But anyway, my mom and dad and sister all played country music. My dad played all the stringed instruments. And I remember sitting under this great big oak table in the kitchen and sitting up against the pillar in the middle and just listening to them. But I didn't join in for the longest time. I never actually picked up the guitar until I was about 17. And then when I did that, I strayed from the flock and fell in love with the music of Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Janis Joplin and, the Jefferson Airplane. It broke my father's heart because my father's favorite song was, "Give me 40 acres and I'll turn this rig around."
Wow.
So anyway, after he got used to the minor chords in my music, we saw eye to eye after that. But that's how I got started. It was just kind of falling into it because we always had instruments around, mandolins, guitars, banjos, pianos, and they played from almost all their lives.
Well, let me ask you this, because you ended up in San Francisco in the 1960s actually performing, which I was really kind of surprised, psychedelic rock with a band known as Office. Now, how did you go from psychedelic rock to being a country singer?
Well, because country music was so natural to me. It was something that I'd heard, and it was really all I'd heard besides Perry Como for most of my life. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, right way up at the tip of the Appalachian Mountains. So there was a heavy country influence everywhere. But we also had Rosemary Clooney and Perry Como and some of those folks. So there were a lot of influences early on in my music, and very early on I made a friend with a record collector whose name was Jim Slifer, and I had a boyfriend named Eric Oberg who they were musicologists, young men, but Slifer had this huge record collection of people like Robert Johnson, and we went back through Leadbelly and all the roots music. Then began to listen to some of the, more modern blues, Turner Ray and Glover and things like that, and up into rock. And at some point in that period of time, I was selling jewelry at the county fair for Big Joe Ryan. And across the way was a long-haired hippie dude selling psychedelic posters. Well, come to find out he was the guitar player. And we fell in love, I guess, and decided that we were going to run off to the West Coast and be flower children. So we did. And that's how I ended up actually in Santa Cruz, California, where I actually spent most of my adult life. And that's a wonderful place to land if you're a musician, because there is a wonderful music school there. There are two, actually. One of them is Cabrillo Junior College, and then University of Santa Cruz is there. And you had people like Neil Young, and you had people like the Jefferson Airplane just right up the road. You had a lot of, we had Merle Haggard right down the road. I mean, it was a melting pot, and it still is a wonderful. There are more musicians in Santa Cruz than people.
Well,
So
do
it was a
you?
great place.
Well, that kind of gives me a thought here, Lacy, because to me, the 1960s and the 1970s is probably actually contains the best songwriting, the best record producing, and those are the songs that we still remember today. It's the songs that get people interested in music. How would you compare the music back then to what we're hearing today?
Well, I think it depends what kind of music you're listening to. A lot of listeners now don't just listen to one kind of music. They listen to all kinds of music. So there's some very good writing now in all kinds of music. And I think there's value in every genre, including some of the really far out stuff, like even the really bizarre jazz that they have. Have you ever seen a new jazz chart, music chart for new jazz? It looks like some kind of a drawing by a crazy artist. But some of the music that is happening now, I think, is just as valid. It's not as familiar yet, and I think it's with familiarity we really learn to love the music that we love because it means more than just a song. It means, gee, that was when I met so and so, and we danced all night, and later on we married and had 3 kids. I mean, I think music is that kind of a thing. It's kind of a language all its own. I was very fortunate because it was really the Outlaws that brought me back to country music. It was Waylon and Willie and the boys. And so I was so fortunate in my career because those are the people I got to tour with, with Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard for long periods of time. I even played David Allan Coe's wife in a movie called Take This Job and Shove It. So I was always traveling with the Outlaws. Hank Jr. I traveled with for about 1.5 years with a big Southern rock and roll band, and I had the best. That, oddly enough, as wild a guy as Hank Jr. is, he had the most professional stage I have ever been on in my life. There was if you did a bad show on that stage, it was your fault because there was a guitar tech there. If your guitar was out of tune, he'd come right up, take your guitar, and put another guitar on. You could always hear perfectly. He had an incredibly crack crew, and his band at the time was the Kentucky Headhunters, and we just had a wonderful time touring together, and I was very grateful to tour with those people. It was songs like The Highwayman and Pancho and Lefty and Good Hearted Woman. Those, Country Boy Will Survive. Those were the songs that brought me back to country music. And that's still the country music that I love, is the outlaw kind of stuff that goes on.
Well, when you toured with, let's say, the Outlaws, did you learn anything from them that added to your career?
Well, I'll tell you what, I from Hank Jr., I learned the better your stage is, if you can afford to have a really professional stage, you are going to have the best show you can have every single night. With some of them I learned Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson absolutely know who they are. And Waylon Jennings. Waylon, I'll never forget following Waylon into Billy Bob's. And I went back in the dressing room, and I was just the first act after Waylon had just been there. And on the wall it said, Waylon, by God, Jennings. And that's how those guys were. They knew who they were. They knew what they wanted to say to people. And they said it in a down-home way that everybody could understand. It affected my writing very, very much. Chris Christopherson, my very favorite singer-songwriter ever, still to this day. Huge influence. And I got to tour with Chris and Johnny Cash and the great Bobby Bare on a European tour sometime in the 80s. And that was the most wonderful tour of all, I think, because I was so appreciative of some of the writing that went on. Some of those folks really know how to write a song that's going to live forever.
Yeah, I mean, and those are, everybody you mentioned, they're just huge icons. And to know that, who you are as an artist. Even Johnny Cash knew who he was. And
absolutely.
And I understand that you had toured with, well, of course, you said Hank Williams Jr. What did it mean to you to be one of the very, very few female opening acts for someone like that?
Well, I was very honored because these were the people who I most admired in country music, were the outlaws. That's what brought me back to country music. I grew up with country music. I always liked country music. I understood it because it's all I ever heard. But when I heard the outlaws talking about things that were unusual, like the highwayman, talking about coming back, I don't believe we do this just once. But to hear my heroes singing a song saying they didn't believe that either was a pretty empowering thing for me because I don't think we do this once. I think we come back lifetime after lifetime. And that's what that song, The Highwayman, is all about. And a lot of the things they were talking about, they talked about heavy things. There was a song called Desperados Waiting for a Train about two old men waiting to die. And it was just beautiful. And Pancho and Lefty was the great outlaw song of all time. And it was written, I got to spend a whole day with Townes Van Zandt, the writer of that song. I had the man who taught me how to write songs was a man by the name of Fred Kohler. And he came to stay at my house for 2 weeks one time with Shel Silverstein. And between the two of them, I had the crash course in songwriting of life because I don't know what they were on. Shel wore an Indian bedspread for the entire 2 weeks from my roommate's bed. It was orange and black. And he wore that like a toga the whole time. And everything you said became a song. If you said, we have to go get the mail, that's a song. Gotta go get the mail. Gotta go get that's the hook. And they would teach, and that's how they taught. They just wrote about 1,000 songs while they were there. I couldn't wait till they left, actually. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot from them, and they were great fun. And I'm still very dear. Fred Kohler's like a brother to me.
Well, you signed with Columbia Records in 1979, and your career literally just took off like a rocket. Now, your first single was Crazy Blue Eyes, which hit number 17 on the U.S. country charts. Now, in the same year, you were named Best New Female Vocalist at the 1979 CMA Awards. What was that time in country music like for you?
Well, I was so thrilled that Crazy Blue Eyes made such an impact. And I was so grateful to have that song as my first hit because I wrote it with my longest friend. My friend Mary McFadden and I have been friends since we were 7 years old. And we're still friends now. And I don't even want to tell you how long that's been. But that song was magic because we wrote that song in my little cabin up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. She was recovering from a divorce. I put on a pot of coffee and sat down and started to write, and I put a broomstick up underneath she was sleeping in the loft in the next room, and I said, Mary, get down here. You're in a perfect mood to help me write this song. We wrote that song, and it was the song that actually we had offers from every record company. It was just amazing. And I was amazed because we even had an offer from the Rolling Stones to be on Mick Jagger's record company. But CBS moved the quickest, and I was very glad because I got to record with the great Billy Sherrill, who was the most wonderful producer I ever had, and the most loving, gentle, supportive. He believed in me more than I believed in myself. So that was a really wonderful start. You couldn't start any better. You couldn't have any better start than I had. And CBS Records was very good at promoting me. I had a manager who was very inexperienced, but he was very enthusiastic, and his enthusiasm went a very long way to getting me a really solid start in country music. But country music wasn't exactly a good fit for me. I am now, I do singer-songwriter stuff now, and that's really what I love. That's the stuff like you might hear a Guy Clark or, a Christopherson or someone like that. That's really what I love, and that's what I do now. And it all was a way of preparing me to know who I am so that I can write from that place of knowing, I don't think you can write from that place. Well, although Hank Williams Sr. did it, and he was 12. He wasn't very old when he wrote, but I do think it takes some living. Maybe it wasn't his first lifetime as a.
Yeah. Well,
I
let me
mean,
ask. Well, Lacy, let me ask you this because in 1979, everything took off for your career. What type of added pressure comes along when you have a hit song and you start winning awards?
well, the award was a huge surprise to me. It was just a huge surprise, and I was so happy. I never got into music because I wanted to be a star. That was never my motivation. I got into music because I love music because it's a great way to communicate with people. It's a great way to heal people. If you have a song that, and I most of my projects all the way back were songs to give people courage and to, we know this is not an easy place. I don't know what we compare it to, but this world is not an easy place sometimes to be in. And sometimes we need to have some support. And that's why I did music. So I was so pleased to get that award because I knew it would make my mother so happy. And it did. I mean, it just was like the biggest thing in the world for her to get the award. And I was happy for my family for that. But that was the awards were never a goal for me. And I always found I'm sorry to say this, it's not a very popular thing to say, but I always found award shows very tiresome. I had to go there and sit through all that. And that was, that was not why I did music. It just wasn't. And now I get to, because of having had that and had that stardom and had that big good start, I now get to do exactly what I want all the time. And that's rare. I'm not huge and famous and wealthy or anything, but I get to say whatever I want to say in my shows. I get to sing whatever I want to sing, and I get to talk about whatever subjects I want to talk about. And I don't have to worry about anything, except getting tomatoes thrown at me.
Well, in 1986, you went back to your rock and roll and R&B roots with Highway Diner. How much input did the record company have back then, and was there any pushback with that album?
Well, the pushback was actually the record company had changed presidencies, and I was not able to be with Billy Sherrill anymore. I was with the new guy, and the new guy, I don't really think it was a very traditional time in country music. Ricky Skaggs was the biggest thing in the world, and the Whites, traditionalists. Vince Gill was even very traditional back then. People were very traditional, and this guy said, "Well, I want you to make a populist album," and I thought, "You want that? That's not what I think we should do. But if that's what you're going," I said, "I'll make one record for you." Because I don't think you are really a fan, and I don't think you're going to promote anything I do. Wow. But I'm going to make the best populist record that I can possibly make. And I'm not going to be here in Nashville to make it. I'm going to go to Memphis. So I went to Memphis, and I made the album Highway Diner, and it got the most insanely great reviews. I mean, the New York Times said, "Why aren't they promoting this record?" I knew why. Because the guy didn't really, he told me himself, he said, I wanted off the label immediately. And he said, I'm not going to let you go, and I'm not going to compete with you. So you're going to be here for a long time. And I said, well, I may be here, but I don't have to record for you. So I didn't for 4 years. It was the kiss of death for a career.
Yeah.
And eventually I went to the next biggest guy in Nashville, who was Jimmy Bowen. And I said, Bowen, will you please do me a favor and buy me out of this record deal? Because I am just dying on the vine here. I've got a little boy to support. I'm a single woman. My husband, I was widowed early. And I've got this little boy to support. And I have to be out on the road. And I can't work because I don't have any promotion behind me. So Bowen took me, I think, out of pity. But he always thought I was too old. There was this big thing about, you're too old. It was a huge thing when I first got my first record deal. I was 33. I was ancient. Even the New York Times made a big deal of how old I was. So there was always that age discrimination. Well, with Bowen had all these boutique labels. And we went through, I think, 4 of them together. We'd make a record, leave it behind. Nobody would promote it because we weren't there. And we'd go to his next boutique label. And we'd make a very expensive record. They got left behind. Nobody's ever heard these records. I tried everything. I tried every possible type of music that you could possibly, in country music do. And because I thought, well, maybe it's me, maybe I'm not doing what they want me to do. But in fact, that was the real story, Dr. Ward. That was what happened. And finally, after 4 of these boutique disasters, they were it was like having 4 stillbirths.
Yeah.
Having 4 children that died. And I was over it, and Bowen was over it. And they told me it was time for me to look for my options. And I thought, well, what options do you have if you're already too ancient to make records with the guy who's the most powerful guy in Nashville? So I went off by myself. There were some independent people that wanted to sign me. And I thought, geez, if major record companies do what they do to you, and you end up not having any money, what's going to happen with an independent that doesn't have that kind of funding? So I just kind of went back and pulled back into my own thing, and eventually raised enough money to make a CD in 2006. Well, I started it in 2003 and finished it in 2006. It was called The Last Wild Place Anthology. And that CD in 2019, 13 years later, because it had no promotion, of course, because I don't have that kind of dough behind me. It became, for Strictly Country Music and the Spirit Awards, the CD of the year, the independent CD of the year. And one of the songs was the best well-written song of 2019. And it won the Pete Huttlinger Award for Musical Excellence, a 13-year-old CD. But nobody knew I was doing Americana, except the few people who I was able to get that CD too. But it's a good life now. I have control over what I do, and I can just I have the perfect life now. It's freedom.
Well, the thing that I can't understand is why would a record label spend so much money to produce a record and then not promote it? See, I love marketing. I love promotion. If I like something, I interview tons of recording artists. If I like the album, I want to shout it from the mountaintop. I don't understand why these record labels stay quiet.
Because they can. Because at the time that I was on Jimmy Bowen's label, he had Garth Brooks. So that was making gazillions and gazillions of dollars. They needed the write-offs. And they just wrote it off.
Oh.
And that's how that happens. It doesn't hurt them at all. Of course, you have to pay it back. If you ever get any play on anything, you never get anything for it. I was talking to Gail Davies the other day, who was the same vintage as I am as far as a recording artist. She said, even the records that I produced, I've never made a penny. All the hits that she had, and as a producer in Nashville, she said, I never made a penny. And it's just the story, I think probably country music came to that even slower than black music. I think that it has even, I remember I've had songs that were, in fact, one of the biggest songs that I have ever written, the biggest, that had more play in the United States than any other, I never got a penny for it.
My goodness. Well, see, I was on Spotify, and, you have a couple of songs. One of your songs is 2.2 million plays. Another one's 1.8 million. I think Take It Easy is at 200,000, which really kind of surprised me because I love that song. Well, actually, it's Black Coffee. That's 1.8 million plays on Spotify, which, Lacy, that song is fantastic. I love Black Coffee.
I love it too, and I wish I had written it, but it was written by my dear friend Eben Stevens and Hillary Cantor. They wrote that song, and they brought it to me when I was really cold. I had a really big hit in a really long time, and I said, even this, why would you give me such a good song at such a time in my career? He said, because you can sing it. And so I did. And so it went all over the world as a number one dance hit. It became a dance hit, and people, the record company, for some reason, didn't even make copies of it. People were pirating it like mad all over the world. It's like a big hit in South Africa, places I've never played, and you know.
Yeah, I think. Well, Lacy, don't you believe that with record labels, maybe the most successful songs or the most successful albums are based on the fact that someone at the record company absolutely understands music instead of all of the accountants trying to run everything?
I have to tell you, I have the perfect example of that, and I agree with you absolutely 100%. When we had the song 16th Avenue, the then president of the record company, who wasn't Billy Sherrill, didn't believe in the song and really didn't even want it promoted. Jack Laymeyer was the head of promotion at CBS Records, and he stepped out on his own and called every reporting radio station in the United States and said, this song, people are going to think this song is about their town. They don't know that it's 16th Avenue in Nashville. Don't even worry about that. And he was absolutely right. And if it hadn't been for Jack Laymeyer, that song would not be the classic, huge hit record that it was. But he knew what was happening to me. He didn't want it to happen. He and I were friends, and he promoted that song. So he and his staff, his great staff at CBS Records, they really did a good job for me at CBS.
Yeah, I really love people who will step out and when, to me, if you really truly believe in something, something can happen. And it's just people like that I think we need more of in the music industry. Sometimes I hear a song on the radio now and I'm thinking, why did they release that? Because some of the songs just don't catch on. And, to me, music has an emotional attachment. Many of the people that I've interviewed, we've talked about how the songs that they've either written or songs they've recorded have become memories for millions of people out there, including all of your songs. The same thing. People will have something happen in their life and that song comes on the radio and they will always remember that song, but also remember the memory attached to it.
Yeah, I am especially pleased when they will tell me that, they heard my song Survivor and they were, in a cancer ward and they didn't think they were going to make it. One woman came up to me after a show in Watsonville, California, and she came to the fence, and I didn't sing Survivor that night, even though it was a hit. I didn't sing it because I just found out that it had been pushed aside so that someone else's record could be the top debuting single ever. And I knew if I sang the song, it would depress me in the show. So I was walking back to to our bus to get back on the road. And this woman came up to the chain link fence and she said, Lacy, and she was shaking the fence. She said, please talk to me. Please talk to me. She said, why didn't you do Survivor tonight? Why didn't you do it? And I told her, I said, well, I've had some disappointing news about it. And I know that it's not going to be the record that I thought it was going to be, even though it was the hot, most added thing in the first place and people really dug it. Fortunately, it had a good video that carried it on. But she said, I was in a coma for 3 months. And my friend played that song every day to me over and over. And she said, I'm alive. I'm awake because of that song. Don't ever not do that song again. And that's the kind of story, and that's not the only story with that song that I've heard, or some of the others that are, Hard Times was another one. There were, all through my career, I always tried to do songs that would do that for people, because I know when I heard Why Me, Lord by Chris Christopherson, it changed my life. When I heard his song, The Heart, it changed my life. That's what you want to do. That's what you want a song to do. And I've been fortunate.
Yeah, I agree, because when you have fans that relate to a particular song and you're able to hear their stories, I think it just makes, the career that much better for artists. I mean, I talk to so many people, and we get into that conversation where fans come up to them after a show and say, this song means so much to me, and this is why. And it was funny. I was actually listening to the song Survivor before we got together on this interview, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is such an anthem for so many people. And to me, I would love to hear the song back on the radio right now, because I think a lot of people would be blessed by it.
Well, we sure could use it, couldn't we, right now? We sure could use a little good news and a little strength. And that song just absolutely did it. And I did not write that song. I was trying to write that song with a friend. And he said, I know why we're not getting this down the way we want. I said, why? He said, because it's already been written. I said, it has. He said, yes. I said, well, I didn't know that. And I said, let's hear it. Could we hear it? And it was not, nobody knew the song. It was, they hadn't had a hit on it or anything. They had just written it. Well, I heard the song and I thought, this is exactly what I want to say. And I got to change a few words so that it fit me a little better. And they were really good about that. And I'm still pleased and I have so many stories about that particular song that that's what keeps you going. In this business, if you don't learn to endure, if you don't learn, it's not always going to be the mountaintops. It's going to be that rocky ravine at the bottom where you can hardly walk, that you have to get through. And it's the people saying things like that to you that will get you through those really dark times. It's just people saying, I just felt this tonight. You made me feel this way tonight. And I was so grateful. And that's why we do music. That's why a lot of us do it. It's a good feeling to be a purveyor of good news.
Well, if you ever write an autobiography, I think your title would be Survivor, because I think it's just perfect.
Well, that's really funny. Well, I think we both are, and I think it's wonderful, and I think the work you're doing is going to help a lot of people survive a lot of things, and particularly this COVID thing. I just cannot wait to hear your show. I am excited to hear it. I'm so interested in supplements. I have been for many, many years. And I totally believe in, complementary medicine as well as regular medicine.
Well, yeah, and both of them can be used together. I mean, I have so many colleagues that are medical doctors that absolutely believe that you have to have the natural side to work with their conventional side. And, I always laugh. I said, look, if you ever get hit by a bus, you need to call a surgeon. Don't call your nutritionist, okay? There's certain specialties that are perfect for certain things, and that's one of them.
Well, there's just sometimes you need the white man doctor.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I know that it's been, it's funny because when your name is mentioned when it comes to music, I always hear the name Bonnie Raitt mentioned in the same sentence. Have you and Bonnie ever collaborated on a song?
Actually, we have not, but we've had the same crew sometimes. A lot of my friends in Santa Cruz do road managing for her and sound for her. And we don't know. Bonnie and I've only met, I think, one time, but I'm very honored when anybody ever says that, because I'm a very big fan of hers. I think she's a great artist.
Well, I know that last year, in 2021, you celebrated the 40th anniversary of Everybody Makes Mistakes. What are your fondest memories of that album and the tour?
Well, I think I was so surprised. I didn't think Billy would like that song. Billy Sherrill was my producer at that time. I didn't think he would like it. So he was talking to George Jones or something. I was sitting in the outer office, just playing Everybody Makes Mistakes as I like to play it. And he called me in after whoever it was. I think it was George. He left, and Billy said, come on in here. I said, what is that? What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm playing this song that I wrote called Everybody Makes Mistakes. He said, well, why haven't you shown it to me? And I said, well, Billy, you like pop music. You like big pop. You decorated my life. I said, I didn't think you'd like this. And he said, I do like it. And he and I finished that song together. And it was the biggest song I ever had play on in the United States. And I never knew it till 2 years ago. But I like the song. I like playing it.
Yeah, I mean, your music is so fantastic. And, to hear stories of, you know, the things that you've mentioned, like, I didn't make a penny off that song, or things of that sort, or producers not making money there. That literally irritates me so much because that's just not fair. I mean, the music industry.
Much that irritates me.
Well, the music industry is the strangest industry I have ever seen. And today, more people can only earn a living by touring than selling albums because of all the way things are set up with downloads. And then when the pandemic happened for 2 years, nobody was touring. I mean, how did you
awful. You talk about a drought.
Well, how did you survive the last 2 years due to the pandemic and not touring?
Because my government was kind enough to offer me gig worker unemployment. And I was able to get that because I have a fine manager now named Leslie Adams. She filled out the paperwork for me, which I probably would never been able to get through myself. And I was able to weather that storm with the help of my government. And I'm very grateful for that. This is the greatest country on earth. We cannot forget it.
Yeah.
We cannot forget it. And we need to be the greatest country. We need to conduct ourselves in a way that is great, always.
I agree. Now, are there any of today's artists that you would love to collaborate with?
Well, about 5,000 of them. I mean, there are some that are so very, very wonderful. There are probably, I would have to say at least 15 of there are some of these young outlaw artists who are kind of carrying forward that outlaw thing. There's something about that music that kind of cuts through all the crap to me. I like earthy, rootsy music that delivers a message in a really understandable, simple way, and not real flowery.
Yeah.
When the music starts getting really sappy and flowery, I just can't do it.
No.
It has to be.
No, I agree. I think a lot, and I'm not going to mention any names, but a part of country has got to be so pop that when you watch the artist on an award show, you're sitting there thinking, that's not a country song. To me, for modern day country, it's going to be people like Chris Stapleton singing songs that's country, or Luke Combs, that's country music.
I just tend to like that stuff that's simpler. Not overproduced. I just as soon listen to somebody with a guitar and a bass. I mean, I guess the problem is I really am kind of a folk singer at heart. I played folk music for a long time before I got my deal in country music. That was pre the psychedelic period, and it is now again. I will do what is kind of, I don't know how you would describe my music now. People will ask me, is it Americana? Well, I don't think it. I guess it is. It's about the closest thing I can say. I have a song called Scarecrow that I could not tell you. It's kind of Appalachian sounding. Kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
If I had to describe it, I don't know how I would describe it. It's just what comes through in a very authentic way from spirit, that it just comes through. And it's not, you can't put it in a corral. I never did like fences, and I will kick them down.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Tell us about your love of wild horses. And how did you get
Oh,
involved with that?
well, I love animals. I love all animals. And I've always loved horses. And my sister, when we were young, had a riding stable. So I got to ride a lot of different kinds of horses and just always loved them. And when sometime in my early 30s, I bought a little horse. And that horse lived for 30 years, and we had a wonderful time together. He was a very spirited, powerful animal, and I loved riding him. And when I first came out to work in Las Vegas and in Reno, um, I got to be friends with a lot of the folks that were the staff, the people that were the sound men and the lighting people and the promotion people and the people that ran these big casinos out here. And I became friends with them. And so after I would do a stint in a casino, which just is, well, for me, after 2 weeks in a casino of 3 shows a night, you need to decelerate. So I would go up into the mountains, and I had a friend in Virginia City who I would stay with. And I'll never forget, we were sitting on her porch one night, right about dusk, and we had candles lit. She had a big pot of tea, and we were just sitting in this beautiful little Victorian house on E Street in Virginia City, which is just exactly how it always has been. It's the same now as it ever was. It's not been gentrified. It's the way it was. And we sat on that front porch, and we were sitting in the dining room, and I heard this sound. And I said, Elaine, what am I hearing? And I'll never forget. She put her finger up in the air. She said, listen, there's a horse coming. And I went out on the front porch of her little Victorian house, and here was this little herd of 4 or 5 wild horses walking up E Street in Virginia City, which only has a few thousand people. I mean, it's a tiny little town. But here these horses are walking up the street, and I thought, right then, those horses can be wild and free and walk down this E Street in Virginia City. This is where I need to be. And I looked for years to find a place here, and I was really attracted by the wild horses. They had the largest contiguous herd of wild horses on private land here, except for Indian reservations, and arguably anywhere in the United States. And they're called the Comstock wild horses. And I bought a house here, and 30 or 40 of them would go through my front yard every day. And I would see them in the spring. This little beautiful stallion would come through with his babies. And I wasn't here very long before I realized they were in terrible trouble, because like many of wild animals in our world, we are encroaching so totally upon their environment that they can't do their migratory paths. They can't get where they need to go to get water and new feed and so on and so forth. And they were also hated here, pretty much not citizens that people liked. Mostly because there were people who were leasing cattle lands from the Bureau of Land Management for very low prices. But before they'd ever get the cattle out on the land, a herd of horses would go through and eat all the grass. So you could see there could probably be a little friction. And the horses up here, where I live up on the mountain, the Comstock herd, which is usually about 2,500 horses, has been for a long time, somehow fell between the cracks with the law. It was not, the BLM said there were no, Bureau of Land Management said there were no horses up on this mountain. They just weren't. Well, there actually were. They just migrated. And they actually stay here quite a bit of the time. So the Bureau of Land Management said there were no wild horses. So the responsibility for those horses fell upon the state of Nevada. And the state of Nevada had neither the money nor the manpower, nor much interest in doing anything with those horses except keeping them out of the way of the cattle people. And the horses themselves were getting on the roads where they were a danger to the motorists and a danger to themselves. And I worked for a very long time with the folks that own that have the biggest industrial park in the world, called Tahoe Reno Industrial. The broker for that park was a man named Lance Gilman. Lance Gilman happened to be the son of one of the queens of the Pendleton Rodeo. And he loved horses, and he happened to be having an affair with the most famous madam in the world of the Mustang Ranch, which was on the property of Tahoe Reno Industrial, this huge industrial park. That industrial park was at that time 102,000 acres, and most of those wild horses like to be there. There's a river there that runs through, and lots of springs. And it took a long time, but with the help of the broker of that park, who convinced the owner of the park that those horses might be a good reason for people to move their companies to that big park. Well, I read an article, I think it was in Atlantic Monthly, and in that article it said international corporations move their headquarters to places that have three, I can only remember two of the things, but two of the reasons. One of them was proximity to wildlife, and the other was proximity to a brothel. And so I kept selling this point to them. And finally we were actualized because Walmart moved in there. And the first thing Walmart did, they put this huge super and fulfillment center there. And on their great big water towers, they painted wild horses. Well, that was the beginning. And then people like Tesla and blockchains and a lot of big companies moved in and became interested. They came because of the horses, not the only reason. They got the best deal in the world to be there, but they liked the horses. And now they are actively supporting those horses. And so our horses, which were not protected really by anybody, particularly not by the state, are now being protected by those big companies and by Tahoe Reno Industrial. And that has been a great and wonderful thing because they were the horses that actually started the whole movement to protect horses by Wild Horse Annie. Some of these horses were the horses she was following a truck going to slaughter, and out of that truck there was blood dripping, and she knew that the horses that they had rounded up here had been abused, and that started her writing letters with all the school kids in the United States, and they had more letters to Congress than any other issue besides the Vietnam War. And they passed the Wild Horses and Burros Preservation Act in 1971, which protected and made 88 million acres originally available where horses were to be the prime form of wildlife. They were to be the pinnacle of wildlife. Well, sir, that didn't work for a lot of people. And I think, Leslie, was it 22,000 that it's been reduced to now, or 27,000? It first got reduced to 55 million to 27 million acres. And still, the Bureau of Land Management now is still wanting to take, they have more than 1,000 acres per every horse.
27,000 horses on
27,000 acres. 27,000 horses on 27 million acres. And they think that's too many horses. So that's our government. And I personally said, I tell people I don't really want to make a statement because, in my opinion, the Bureau of Land Management would like to get rid of all but just a few of the horses. It's just that the American public who voted for the 1971 Act to protect them won't allow them to do that. And a lot of the big organizations like Humane and ASPCA and American Wild Horse are fighting all these things in battles in courtrooms around the country to try to somehow do what the American people really want, is to preserve some of these horses in a natural way on land that they should be able to have some of them on. It's a very sad situation. I don't know that there are so many wild horses, and the land is so valuable to developers of all kinds for industrial developments and so on, and ranches, corporate ranching, and so on. We need a solution. I didn't want to ever do birth control myself, but I had to. I didn't want to do that for my own personal self. I don't really love doing it for the horses, but if we don't do that, we're not going to have any left. And that is really how that is my position on that thing. If it's done properly, if birth control is done properly, they can immunize a mare for about 6 years, and she can still have some babies afterwards. So, 3 to 6 years is about as many times as you can keep a horse infertile and not injure her. If you keep it longer than that, then she becomes permanently sterile. we always fear that if the government has the control of it, that they will, oops, it's been 7 years. Oops, we forgot,
Yeah.
you know. And I just, I wish I could be more hopeful about the wild horses.
Yeah, but I'm glad there's someone like you that's picked up the torch to try to help them and to keep it going. I mean, 27,000 wild horses. I mean, if there was no birth control, it'd be over 100,000 by now?
Well, they're kind of like rabbits. So you have to, I think that if it were done properly, although I would not trust the Bureau of Land Management, which has been called by the Government Accountability Office the most awful, not great agency in the government. If they handle it, I'm not sure they would handle it properly. But I do think it's probably the one hope we have, so that your grandchildren and their children and their children will be able to see these wild horses, which to me is a symbol of our American freedom. And we built our civilization on the bones of these horses. We conquered the West because of horses. Because we had horses and guns, we were able to win the West.
We
owe them. We owe them. And that's how I feel. Plus, there's something about a horse. All of your Christian believers out there will tell you that Christ is going to come back on the back of a white horse. Well, let's hope we have one for him to ride.
I bet God already has that in the plan. And I don't think we have to worry about that because, I look forward to the day he comes. So, we need to have that kind of faith. And even though we all want to accomplish great things, we need to look for the coming of the Lord. And thank you for bringing that up, Lacy. And keep up the great work. But I want to ask you something. Is there any new music coming from you?
Yes, sir, there is. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a project right now called For the Black Sheep. I've finished 2 of the songs for that project, and I have some others that I have recorded that I'm going to include that haven't been heard because they're on independent CDs that have not been ever really promoted. But it just actually is that sort of a CD to remind people that somebody's steering the ship. Whatever you call that, however you come to it, that's what's happening. It's not really a religious thing.
Yeah.
I think when
encouraging, it's enlightening, it's inspirational, motivating.
Well, we hope so. The first song I wrote is called "The Devil" by a different name.
Well, you ought to write a song called "Outlaws and Wild Horses."
Well, you know what? That's probably a very good title.
It'd be a great album.
The Outlaws do.
Yeah, album title would be awesome.
Do you know Willie is a big wild horse fan? Did you know that?
No, but I could see that.
He has rescued many. We love Willie. I hope Willie lives to be 9,040 years old. And I think he should be declared a national treasure and never have to pay another penny in taxes. Willie Nelson is he's a great hero to me and a great role model. He is the kindest man. He is the finest man.
Yeah, I mean, even when I read about the fact that you were the only female, I guess, half Nelson, I mean, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was such a huge honor. And it was such a surprise. I had no idea. I have a friend who's, he wouldn't like me to say this, but he's a medicine person, an Apache man from down in Texas. He's a Texas boy. And he said, Lacy, need to hear this song. And he played it for me, and I loved it. He said, need to do this with Willie. And I said, well, I can't exactly call Willie up and say, I'd like to do this song with you. He's pretty high up there on the, I don't even know. He said, oh, let me see if I can get this to it. And he got the song to Willie, and it had been written for Willie 20 years before by the writers. And they had given it to Willie, and he had just finished recording. So he gave the song to Waylon, and Waylon recorded it. The song is called Slow Moving Outlaw. It's a wonderful song. And my friend, my Indian friend, got the song to Willie, and Willie agreed to do a duet with me on the song. And I had no idea I was the only woman, none whatsoever. But I'm so honored by it. It was, they gave me a platinum record this year to honor that, and I think that my kids are going to really like that. I'm honored by it, and I think they will be as well.
Well, you ought to be honored by it. I think it's just a fantastic thing to have, and to know that you sang a duet with Willie Nelson. My gosh, I mean, that's just so incredible. Now, are you going to be going on tour this year?
Well, we tour in little. We don't do what we used to do. There used to be a roadhouse about every 300 or 400 miles, all the way across. DUIs put that right out of business. So now there are lots of little theaters. In fact, we just played a beautiful little theater in Yerington, Nevada, just Saturday night, and it's very hard. These theaters have a hard time. We're playing the Sutter Creek Theater down in Sutter Creek, California, and that will be April the 23rd. We're playing that theater. And I'm playing with the Pops Orchestra here on July the 9th, so that'll be great. But before that, we go on this cruise. But we don't tour. I don't tour like I used to, which would be, touring six shows or 10 shows, depending on however many you could get, and you're just on the road all the time. We don't do that. We go out in little forays. We go out, we're weekend warriors, and then we come back, and then we go on out. And we might drive. I'd prefer to drive anywhere. I would rather drive 3,000 miles than fly an hour and a half.
I'm the same way.
After all these years, when I was, I think, 46, I had 1 million miles on one of the 4 airlines that I flew all the time. And I'm not a fan of it anymore. It's just too confining. And I love having all my stuff with me and being able to stop. Like, you can stop and see the giant twine ball, or you can go and see the devil's post pile, or you can stop and do stuff. You can see America. So that's the way we tour now, and it's really fun. I have a wonderful manager. She really knows how to find a decent hotel that's going to be clean and affordable and really nice and good places to eat, and touring is a joy now. It's really fun.
Well, we have a place not but about 6-7 miles from my place called Dosey Do's. All of the country music artists go there. It's this little house that they took apart out of Kentucky, brought it down here, put it back together, put a stage inside of it. I was talking to Joe Bonzel of the Oak Ridge Boys. They had performed there, and he laughed because the stage was kind of small, and he elbowed his guitar player in the face that night. And I was actually there when they were there. But they even have songwriter nights over there, and but they're known for having probably the world's best coffee. So it'd be a great place to see you there.
Well, I'm sold. I wish we got to Texas more. We were just in Abilene. Mark Powell is a wonderful songwriter and puts on a lot of music down there, and had me down for a songwriter thing in Abilene, and it was just quite wonderful. We had a great time. There are a lot of great writers in Texas. You guys have something about Texas. Some things about Texas I could disagree with. I'll just tell you that right now. But the music in Texas is just always so authentic and so real and so precious, and it stays pretty real down there.
It does.
You rub up against those guys who are really authentic and really saying what they think and really meaning what they say and walking their talk. You're not going to be able to get away with a lot of moonshiny stuff. You're just not. So the music in Texas, I'm 159% fan.
Well, I am going to give you a personal invitation to come to Texas and perform, and you're definitely welcome to the state of Texas anytime, Lacy. And my goodness, I've had such an incredible joy talking with you today.
Right back at you. I have just enjoyed. I had no idea that this was going to be as much fun as it is. I've really had a really fun time, and I can't wait to watch your show. I'll probably be a dude.
Well, I
I'll
appreciate
probably.
that. Well, I can't wait. Well, I tell you one thing: when you come out with the new album, you're gonna have to let me know so I can have you back on the program, and we will do what is absolutely right, and that is to promote it from the tallest mountain and let the rest of the nation know how good it's going to be.
Dr. Ward, thank you so much. I'm excited, and I hope you'll like the new record. I hope you'll like it.
I know I will. I like all your albums, and I've been spending so much time listening to a lot of your songs, preparing for this interview, and um, you've always had what it takes, regardless what happens with the lazy music industry not doing their job. All I know is if I was there, I would have promoted you like again from the highest mountain, and that's what all artists who put out an album, that's what they deserve. They need to be heard, and they need to be promoted the best way possible. If you're going to put in the work, tell the whole world about it.
Thank you. I
Well,
couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the living legend herself, country music recording artist Lacy J. Dalton. And as for me, you got to stay tuned because we'll be right back after this.